Good evening, everyone. My name is Joanne Benton, Superintendent of Schools for Wilmington. I'm pleased to welcome you here this evening at our second community forum on looking at the master plan study. Just a brief history. Back in the spring of 2006, the town meeting authorized funding for a school feasibility plan. The process coincided with the Wilmington Public Schools strategic plan development under the direction of the former superintendent, Bill McAuliffe. In the process of the strategic plan, one of the overriding concerns that was expressed with the community members who attended our meetings was the state of the high school and the future of the high school. 13 companies presented proposals to do a master planning study, and late spring last year, Dorr and Whittier Architects was chosen. And throughout the summer and early fall, they met with different members of boards in the community. They met with our leadership team, visited all of the schools, brought out assistants to look at the conditions of every part of the building, and produced a master plan study. This plan was presented to the public on March 31st and has been available in the library and town hall and at the Roman House. The purpose of this evening's meeting is really to gain feedback from all of you. We have the selectmen here this evening, the school committee, finance committee members as well, and we're looking to receive feedback from you. So the structure will be for a short presentation by Don Walter, architect from Dorr and Whittier, who will review the process and talk about what the next step is in where Wilmington needs to go, and then we will open it up for questions. I asked for the purposes of everyone hearing, if you have a question, if you would come up to one of the mics up in front. This is always is also being filmed by WCTV, and we thank them for being here this evening. I know you know the gentleman to my right, Town Manager Michael Kyra, recently inducted into the High School National Honor Society, and we're very proud of that. And Head Architect Don Walter, who I will turn the presentation over to. Great.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Mike. Good evening. Thanks for allowing us to come back to Wilmington and do an update on the study that we've put together. As Joanne mentioned, we've been in the community for just about a year now, working on this master plan for the schools. And we did do a presentation to a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen, School Committee, Finance Committee, and numerous other boards and committees about 2 months ago. What I have here tonight is the PowerPoint presentation that was looked at by the group, and we went through it in quite a bit of detail, essentially about an hour and a half worth of presentation. Don't plan on doing that tonight. The intent of tonight really is to get feedback from the community. So I thought what I'd do is take you through a 10 to 15 minute overview of the presentation. When you all came in, if you notice in the back, there were handouts, or hopefully there still are handouts, which is the presentation that I'll go through tonight. So you can follow along, and I guess what we'll do is once I conclude the presentation, we can go into a questions and answers and comment period. So with that being said, let me take you through the presentation and give you a sense of what we've done and where we are today and where we hope to go beyond. Essentially, this study was a study that was focused on all the elementary schools and the high school. We dealt with conducted enrollment projections, did educational programming, site and facilities assessments, and then produced design options to meet the objectives that were uncovered in doing these other three enrollment projections, educational programming, and site and facilities assessments. One of the key components of doing any of this work is to understand that the new Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA is what we call them, is the new authority that is overseeing the reimbursement of and constructing of school buildings in Massachusetts now. There was a former school building assistance board which was heavily involved with the building of the new middle school here. There is now a new authority that we are working with. This is actually the first study that we've done utilizing the new MSBA guidelines. So I want to point that out up front, that anything we do here to gain any sort of reimbursement through MSBA will involve their participation. That has not happened yet. That'll happen down the road, and I'll explain that as we go. Enrollment projections, just to be clear, we went through a number of different methodologies and looking at enrollment to see where in Wilmington student enrollment may be going. It was determined, if you look at the chart, there's 3,840 students as of last October. The projection by our enrollment projections company was to be 3,629. There's a number of factors that may affect enrollments. For planning purposes, we carried a number of 3,775 students district-wide, pre-K to 12. Educational programming, we came in with some of our own ideas on programming based upon other school projects that we've done throughout the Commonwealth and New England, but I want to be very clear that this was an inclusive process, that we included all of the high school principals, staff, leadership team from the schools, worked with town boards to develop an educational program that we feel will meet the needs of Wilmington pre-K to 12. In terms of the elementary schools, from a programming point of view, some important numbers that we discovered. Right on the top of the chart, you'll see the Wilmington averages versus the MSBA standards. MSBA has published standards for classroom sizes and numbers of square feet per student as looking at an overall building. You can see that Wilmington is a bit below what MSBA would be expecting if you were to build a building with them today as an elementary school. Kindergarten classrooms are a bit undersized. Elementary classrooms are actually really of appropriate size. Library and media centers are a little undersized. Gym may be a little undersized. And other spaces actually fell pretty well within the guidelines. At the high school level, again, you'll see that the overall square feet per student was 21 square feet less per student when you look at the entire building. Classroom sizes are a bit undersized. Science labs and classrooms are undersized. Computer lab undersized. The media center library is a bit undersized. And so forth. Actually, auditorium is quite a bit undersized from what MSBA would allow right now, which would be 2/3 of the population. Another important component was going through and looking at the sites and the existing facilities. We went through all of the buildings and looked at all the sites with a team of engineers, consultants, and architects. One thing I want to point out is that these facilities are very well taken care of. Of the 35 to 45 school districts that we worked with in the Commonwealth, this ranks in the upper level of maintenance and facilities conditions compared to other schools that we've seen of this age. So the community should be applauded for that. That being said, even with a regular maintenance program and even with a regular capital improvements program, there are still needs within those schools. They are, in many cases, 50 and 40 years old, and when a building gets to be that old, things tend to break down. So some of the issues that we saw at all of the schools collectively, this isn't pointing out one school versus another, but just getting a sense of all the schools. Some of the issues that we recommend upgrading had to do with site circulation, or how cars and pedestrians and buses move through a site. Increased main entrance visibility. Easy for you as community members, but if there's a visitor coming to some of the schools, there may be a front door, but you got to park behind the building, and then you got to walk around the building to get in, things of that nature. Upgrading stormwater management and making the sites more stormwater friendly, allowing for the stormwater to be managed more properly and not just sheet off the sites. Making the buildings and the sites accessible for people who are physically challenged. Replacement of windows. for energy management, for, in some cases, the ability to open the windows because in many cases they are so old they don't function too well. Replacement of VAT flooring, that's vinyl asbestos tile. That stuff was great. It lasts forever, and you see that's why it's in buildings 40 and 50 years. There is certainly no danger in the VAT that's in those schools right now because it's sitting there solid on the floor. But if you were to do a renovation project within the building, it makes sense to get it out and put in some new flooring. Replacing acoustical ceiling tiles that has been damaged, as well as plaster ceilings. Upgrading HVAC systems. Again, 40 and 50-year-old buildings. Replacing boilers, replacing unit ventilators, upgrading or replacing exhaust systems, upgrading the hot water circulation for the radiant heat that's running around the perimeter of the building. In many cases, needs to be replaced in those schools. Upgrading the electrical services, improved lighting, increasing the number of power receptacles within the classrooms so teachers can teach better. Buildings today, classrooms today require much more power than they did, again, back 40 or 50 years ago. Upgrading plumbing fixtures to not only make them handicap accessible where needed, but also to put in water conserving fixtures. Installing sprinklers in buildings. Not required as the building stands here today, but if you get into some heavy renovations, you'd want to add sprinkler systems to those buildings. And increasing the technology, perhaps upgrading or increasing the number of data drops within the classrooms, within the library media centers, going wireless in some of the classrooms, perhaps having more projectors so teachers and students can interact on a screen that way. So we've looked at the enrollment projections, we've looked at the educational programming, we looked at the site and facility assessment. The next step was to develop design options. We looked at options for all of the school buildings. That's pre-K through grade 12, essentially all 8 elementary buildings, 7 elementary buildings in the high school. We didn't deal with the middle school, which of course is new. In doing so, if you've had a chance to look at the report, we've gone through and developed these design options in a graphic fashion. What we have up here now in these charts are the results of what those schools might look like in terms of number of students and grade configuration and cost. So option 1 was to keep the existing grade configuration, which were 2 grades pre-K to K schools, 2 grades 1 through 3 schools, 2 grades 4 and 5, the middle school and the high school. And if you go across to the right, you can see what how the costs range. We do the costs in a range at this point because there is so much fluctuation in conceptual design making and conceptual cost estimating. Plus the fact that the construction market is so volatile, we may actually find the costs go down in the future, although we've only seen that once over the last 20 years. It may happen again because it's exploded so high to where it is today. So option 1 is to keep the existing grade configuration. Option 2 is to create a lower elementary, upper elementary, middle, and high school configuration, which would reduce the number of schools from 8 to 6. In doing so, we would have 2 schools with grades pre-K to 2 configuration, 2 schools of grades 3 to 5, the 6-8 middle school, and the 9 through 12 high school. Option 3 is an elementary, middle, high school configuration. Again, 6 schools, just as the previous option 3, but in this case we would create 4 pre-K to 5 schools, so more of a neighborhood school situation where students are going from pre-K to 5 before they move on to the middle school, the 6-8 middle school, and then the 9-12 high school. So those 3 design options address all of the, again, enrollment, educational programming, site and facilities assessment needs. We also did an option 4, which is capital improvements only. This is an important option because, quite frankly, you're not going to do all the schools unless, as you see in this last option, you plan on spending $190 million to upgrade all the schools. And these dollars are set as of today, and it's if all the schools are being done at once. Just physically can't happen. If we were to get into a program of upgrading all the schools over time, obviously the cost would need to be upgraded over time also. So keeping that in mind, we also do a capital improvements only plan, which will deal with some of the issues that we talked about earlier in terms of HVAC upgrades, handicap accessibility, window replacement, things of that nature. And those costs are identified on the right here also, which can be turned into or could become part of your capital improvements plan for the town. So we've actually been able to assist in upgrading or updating that work also. One other thing I want to point out with the costs are that the options 1 through 3 design options, we see those as reimbursable projects through the MSBA program. And what that means is essentially issues have been identified with enrollments, educational programming, and facilities assessment. We've put together a plan that addresses those needs. MSBA wants to know that all of those needs are being addressed. That being said, they will reimburse a community for a project that meets those needs. Historically, capital improvements only options will not be reimbursed unless you find that those are the only needs within a school. So as you look at the first 3 design options, as a round number figure, 50% of the cost may be reimbursed by MSBA, whereas under the capital improvements, it is more likely that 100% of the cost will be borne by the community.
Tom, before you do that, you might want to tell them this 4 comes off.
Oh, thank you. The $462 million number down the bottom of the capital improvements only line item, that's when we factored our fee in. That's a typo. So thank you.
Should be 62.
Yeah, it should be 62. Wow. We tried to sneak that one by. Okay. Based upon all the work that we've done, we have a recommendation. And the recommendation is based upon the school needs as we see them and based upon how we see MSBA working moving forward. And basically what we recommend is something to happen to the high school. Whether it's renovations, additions or renovations, a new school on the existing site, a new school on another site, we don't know. We've gone through those options. It's too early to know what the solution may be, although we've given you some potentials. MSBA is a key component in anything that the town may want to do. And I'll get into more detail on that later on, but just want to make that clear that this recommendation is at its infancy based upon a feasibility study that we did working with the town. The next step will be working with MSBA to see truly what the solutions, acceptable solutions to them may be. So just to let you know why we selected the high school, it says it on the sheet and it says it on the slide, but just to reiterate, meets the strategic plan recommendations. We feel that the high school has the greatest needs from a programming point of view. You know, the building is 15% smaller, classrooms are 19% smaller, science classrooms are 15% smaller, and so forth. A high school project will be a place where all of the students of Wilmington can go to. If you were to pick an elementary school, say, you would do an elementary school project, and then the other elementary schools may be left inadequate compared to what's done with that other one elementary school. So looking at a high school project makes a lot of sense because all the students get to have their time there. Students will go from a newer middle school, then into a new high school. And that's actually quite important because you have a lot of features, programs, technology, and offerings in this school that actually there's, while the programs are still available in the high school, they're being made available in a facility that doesn't meet the standards of what you have in your middle school here today. Plain and simple. It's a new building versus an original 1956 building that was last renovated, I think, 22 or 23 years ago. So that's an important point. The elementary programmatic issues are less glaring. The high school projects meet any accreditation concerns. And then, as you look at MSBA, they will only approve one project at a time. When they first opened up the program again, you had communities submitting what's called a statement of interest, which is letting them know that you have a project you'd like to do, submitting multiple statements of interest for one community. A Wilmington, say, may submit, they say, hey, we've got 6 school buildings that we need to address, or 5 school buildings, because they're not going to do the middle school. Let's submit them all. MSBA came back and said, no, pick what you feel has the greatest needs. So that being said, you pick the project that you think is going to, get the biggest bang for the buck, to use a phrase that's used quite often. But that's important because they're going to want to deal with one project at a time, and we felt that the high school had the greatest needs. Now, where we are now and where we go. We've done this report. We've made what we feel are valid recommendations, and we feel are sound recommendations. But MSBA needs to be brought in and needs to become a partner with the community. As you can see from under the master plan, and Joanne mentioned in the beginning, the process that we went through to get to today. And essentially we're down to June 4th, which is the second community forum. And ultimately, what's going to be sometime in June, a statement of interest submitted to MSBA if the community decides they want to submit a project. Let me backtrack. It's not submitting a project, it's submitting a building. We've identified needs, we've identified issues, we've identified concerns. What MSBA wants to know right now are what are those needs, what are those issues, what are those concerns. They don't care so much what the solutions are, although it's nice to know what someone's looked at already. They want to know what those issues, concerns, and needs are. So a statement of interest needs to be developed and ultimately voted on and signed by the Board of Selectmen and the school committee, submitted to MSBA, where they will evaluate the statement of interest. They will come out, they will evaluate the school in their own eyes with their own independent consultant, and then they will determine the viability or the merits of going forward with a high school feasibility study. That's what you see as step 3. So essentially sometime after June 1st, we would hope to submit a statement of interest to MSBA to make them aware of what Wilmington may be interested in, and then ultimately do a feasibility study. Well, you say, we just did a feasibility study. Well, in MSBA's eyes, we didn't. We did a master planning study. This is something else that MSBA requires. We've just, and I think the town in its vision has said, let's get this done now. We don't know what our highest priority is. But by bringing in an outside consultant through this master planning exercise, we determined what we thought the highest priority is, which is the high school. What MSBA sees a feasibility study being is a detailed analysis, more detailed than we've gone in already, of the building of choice. So the steps in doing that feasibility study are to form a building committee, which is a cross-section of board members, experts within the community in construction and design, school personnel, municipal personnel, and community members to form a building committee. MSBA will actually do another set of enrollment projections. They want to do their own enrollment projections on top of what has already been done. Excuse me. An owner's project manager, which is a requirement of any school projects in Massachusetts, actually any public work, with an estimated cost of over $1.5 million, community is required to bring on an owner's project manager, whether they're hired as an independent company or an individual outside of the community, or there's someone with the expertise within the community. They can fulfill that role also. That person or company needs to be hired. Hire an architect through the MSBA designer selection process, and then conduct the study. Look at the educational program in even more detail than we've done to date. Go into more detailed site investigation, which will include any wetlands delineation, full topographic and site feature survey work, any geotechnical work or subsurface exploration where either new buildings or building additions may be located. We'll all be part of a site investigation, doing traffic studies to determine what the impact might be on local roads. Doing design options for this particular building, and ultimately coming out with a preferred option, which will then lead into schematic design. So you're going to take this preferred option and develop more detailed plans, sections, and elevations, 3D imagery, outline specifications, which will be the written document that accompanies the drawings, which will talk about building materials, building systems, the structure of the building, things of that nature in more detail. Develop a schedule for construction, and with all this work that we put together, estimate the project cost. Once that is done, and MSBA is working with us right along, there's someone assigned to Wilmington working with us all along the way, there will be a recommendation made to the MSBA Board of Directors, and they will vote on the approval of whatever project is brought forward. When that is done, the town then has 120 days to vote their share of the project cost. So this feasibility study process, just so you know, will take anywhere from 6 to 9 months, depending on the complexity of the program. And I should back up even further. Once the statement of interest is submitted, we would expect that sometime in the fall is when the board would vote to say, okay, go ahead with your feasibility study. So if you move out into the fall for that to start, 6 to 9 months from that time before a feasibility study is completed, you may be sometime in spring or possibly the following fall doing some sort of a vote to secure the funds for the project costs. You then go through your typical further developing of the design and documentation so a building can be built, construction documents, bid the project, and ultimately construct the project. So as you can see, while we've done a lot of work to date, there's a lot more work that'll need to be done beyond this in working with MSBA. So I think these have been great first steps, but it's going to get you to that next point of saying, okay, we think the high school has our greatest need. Let's submit a statement of interest to MSBA and get on there, basically in their queue for doing a feasibility study. That was a little more than 15 minutes. I apologize, but I don't want to leave out so much of the details. So I guess we'll open up for questions and comments unless you guys have anything else to add.
That sounds good. I just want to reiterate one piece that Don talked about. The statement of interest is not a cost to the community. It is the end of the process that you voted for back in 2006. There had been some questions about that over the past couple of weeks. It's not an added cost to the community. So I just wanted to clear that up. Who'd like to begin?
It's crystal clear, right? Yes, sir.
Could you come up to the mic, please?
Dick Hayden, Arlene Avenue. A couple of questions. If we don't do this, do we have any threat of lack of accreditation on the system?
The NEASC, New England Association of Schools and Colleges, accreditates high schools across the United States, and NEASC is in the New England area. our high school is up for accreditation in 2010. There are certain standards that they will look at when they come to the high school. For example, do we have a language lab? No, we do not. Do we have enough space to provide for all of the students? Presently, some of our classrooms are in rooms, were designed as closets, are now used as classrooms. Those, our chemistry labs are not up to standard. Those types of issues will hurt us. And we could be warned, placed on warning for accreditation.
So if somebody made the comment, well, we'll do this 5 years from now or so, not only will it cost more, but we could be then under the threat of a lack of accreditation?
That's correct.
Is that possible?
That is possible, Dick.
Okay. If we were to go ahead now with the statement of interest, is it ready to go?
The statement of interest? It has not been written yet, but all the information is here to put a good statement of interest
So
together.
it could happen in June if
Oh,
we
absolutely.
wanted it to happen in June?
Both the Board of Selectmen and the school committee would need to vote to authorize it
Right, I understand.
to go forward.
My question was it prepared to go to them?
We're prepared to go to them.
How long does the schematic design usually take?
The full feasibility study process will probably take anywhere from 6 to 9 months. It can be done in 6. The one thing we're not clear on right now is how quickly MSBA will follow along, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of other communities like Wilmington interested in projects. But, so they've been telling us 6 to 9 months.
So is the schematic design included in the feasibility study?
Yes, it is.
In the 6 to 9, okay. How long would it take to build, do you think?
Well, it really depends on what the project is. If it's a, major renovation with, say, a small addition, there's going to be quite a bit of phasing involved and moving students around the building and perhaps bringing in portable classrooms to have them in on a temporary basis. Something like that may take anywhere from 30 to 42 months.
Let's assume we used option 4.
Option 4, that can be constructed within 2.5 years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Without any disruption of classrooms.
Right. The idea would be to, if you were to build a new school, even on that existing site, there are some boards up front. If anyone has a chance, they can come down and have a look. The idea would be to build it on the site next to the existing school so we minimize any disruption. The way it's been currently planned is to be located to the north of the gymnasium and run kind of vertical from the street back, perpendicular, not vertical. And so it certainly would affect the parking, but in the practice field in the back, but wouldn't have any effect on what's going on inside the school building.
Hi, Steve Higgins, Nickel Street. So if we get past the statement of interest, MSBA says that go ahead with the feasibility study. Do we have an idea of how much that would cost, and how do we appropriate that money?
I can tell you that the costs have ranged anywhere from $350,000 to $750,000, with high school projects being in probably the $550 to $650 range, real big projects up to $750. That number is actually determined through MSBA. If we go through the submission of the statement of interest, if MSBA says, okay, we agree that you should have a feasibility study conducted, they will call the community in. At that point, they will outline what they see the process being. They will estimate what they think the cost of a new building will be, not a new building, of a building will be. They will give you a sense of what they think your reimbursement rate's going to be, and they will tell you what your feasibility cost will be at that time. And you will then be responsible for your share of that feasibility study, whatever your reimbursement rate is.
So the entire cost of the feasibility study would not be handled by the town. That's also partially
That's
paid
correct.
by MSBA.
We use 50% as a ballpark for what your reimbursement might be. So worst,
So it'd be like the cost of the school itself. They'd pretty much pay for half of it.
correct. So worst case, if it's a $750,000 study, half of that, $375,000, would be borne by the community.
And how would that come about, Mr. Cairo? Would we have to go in for a special town meeting?
The
or-
town, depending, I think, upon when we have that information, the town would either call a special town meeting or wait for the annual town meeting, but would have to appropriate those funds. It would not, in my judgment, it would not require any debt exclusion or override vote, because we've built up, substantial reserves to do something like that. And the other point that I would make is that there's no time limit at that point. So if they come back to us, as Dawn indicated in the fall, and indicated to us what the cost would be and what the reimbursement rate would be, we could make a determination as a community as to whether to go forward at all, whether to go forward in 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, whatever. Obviously, the longer we waited, I suspect the cost could change, but we certainly could time it, I think, if the selectmen wanted to, since they, established a warrant for a town meeting. We certainly could time it for the annual town meeting. That'd be up to the community.
Thank you.
Another important point with MSBA and the way this process is working versus the old school building assistance program is that there used to be a waiting list. You're familiar that projects were submitted and they were put on a waiting list till they were going to receive funding through the old program. With MSBA, there is no waiting list. You come up, you're approved for a feasibility study, you appropriate the money, you're approved for a project, you appropriate the money, and you go. If you are a community that ends up not supporting a project, you won't be put in a waiting list pile. You'll essentially need to come back again at a later date with the same project or another project that the community may then approve. I point that out because with the old system, you could short-term borrow and build your project knowing you're going to get reimbursed down the line. Here, you're just expending more time, which historically has meant that projects are going to cost more. So if you have to wait a year or 2 years before a project is ultimately approved, you'll ultimately be up against the whatever the construction inflation is looking like in that particular time.
How you doing? Dan Wardell, Shawshene Ave, Wilmington. The MSBA, if they're reimbursing 50%, are there any other avenues of reimbursement out there, be it federal or other, that might apply to this type of project?
The 50% is just a ballpark. Right.
Granted, but is it...
Actually, just maybe I should tell you, the range now with the new program is a low of 40%, a high of 80%. What we're finding is most communities are falling within the, say, 53 to 63% reimbursement range. So,
And that would be the total reimbursement. There aren't any federal funds or any other funds available?
yeah, no matching funds from the federal government. Joanne does bring up Massachusetts Technology Collaborative, who help fund green initiatives or alternative energies, photovoltaic cells, rainwater harvesting systems, things of that nature. There is money that's been available for that.
And the other is just methodology. On the federal census data being decennial, it would be 8 years old, with the next one being 2010. How are the other numbers factored in for new construction, new projects, roads that have been built since 2000, people who had moved into town since then?
I can't speak to the specifics, but I know that was factored in with our consultant as they were trying to develop the enrollment projections. Anyone familiar with them know that, they are a bit of a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But you look at the historical data, you try to look at what's happening within the community and compare it to other communities that might be similar and do projections based upon that. Of course, another big factor in any enrollment projections are, the turnover of older homes and trying to build in that number, knowing that homes without children, older citizens may be moving on and families moving in. So it's, we've done our enrollment projections, which we found to be pretty reliable over time. Ultimately, MSBA, in their enrollment projections, will dictate what the school sizes will look like.
Thank you.
Hi, Leslie Quick from Woburn Street. Quick question about the numbers for the estimated project cost. Are the feasibility study estimates rolled into those amounts, or is that separate?
Oh, the cost of doing the feasibility study?
Yes, on the three options that can be possibly reimbursed partially by the MSBA, are the feasibility study amounts that you're estimating rolled into that estimate?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we would have to do that work if there was a feasibility study or not, so that is factored
Okay.
in.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you all for coming this evening. One might ask, why are we thinking of doing something at the high school or any of the buildings in this day and age with the economy? I've been asked that a lot, and I've been trying to think of a response that can convince all of you that, in my opinion, this is the way we need to go. When I think of a high school, I think of a place where students spend more than 6 hours a day, because most of our students are either in sports, or they're in the arts, or in the humanities, and they're spending 6 to 10 hours in a building. And the building needs to support the educational program. And at this time, I can truly say that our elementary school buildings support the educational program we have outlined for our students. But at the high school, that's not so. I talked earlier about language labs for our students. We are graduating students, and I'm proud to say on Sunday we graduated class of 2008. 94% of our students are going on to higher education. Now, when I came here 4 years ago, that number was in the 60s. Those students need to be prepared to enter into a world where they're ready to take advantage of the technologies, ready to take advantage of second languages, ready to take advantage of a 13-year education that prepares them to match up to any other student in the United States and in the global world. I believe that we're not quite there with Wilmington High School. Could the building last another 10 years, 15 years? Absolutely. But I believe this is an opportunity for the community to think about next steps in providing what, as the town manager always says, the future of Wilmington, our students. So I really want to hear from all of you and look forward to continued conversation. And thank you for coming out this evening. I want to thank the selectmen, the school committee, the finance committee, all of the employees of the Wilmington town side and school side who come this evening to help support this, and especially to Mike Cara, our town manager, and to Don Walter from Doran Whittier for doing the presentation this evening. Thank you all, and good evening.